This video is about the HO scale switching layout that started from a single gift. For Christmas a couple years ago, I received this Columbia Valley Models Craftsman kit for this house. I've been modeling in N scale for many years, though I did do a spade of HO about 20 or so years ago. And first I was thinking, well, what am I going to do with this? So from this point, then I thought, well, I have this model, this house kit. I might as well build a layout around it. This layout is only 1 by 6 feet, and it's meant to just fit on a pair of some shelf brackets on the wall. And so it just offers a basic switching operation. However, it can be could be expanded off of either end in the future. The overall track plan is pretty much like a switching puzzle. There is no runarounds. We have a tail track here, which is about half and 2.5 or so feet of tail track from the end of the line with this stick to keep things from running off the track to the roadway. And then I just have a pair of switches that one goes in, serves a grain elevator, and there's a kind of a feed shed behind it, and then I have a team track in front. This is a way that we can have a variety of rolling stock here. You could have things like flat cars or tank cars or gondolas, of which I have samples thereof. The layout is generally supposed to be set in Wisconsin, on the Milwaukee, circa late 70s, 78 or so. Trackwork is all code 70. Track is by Micro Engineering. Turnouts are Shinohara number 4s. You've seen some of my one of the last posts I did while I was trying to get this layout operational for this video. Managed to do the typical Milwaukee fashion here, break a point rail. And some of the issues here are these original Shinohara switches are not DCC friendly, and they tend to short out a lot on the points. And obviously this is some of my failed attempts to get this thing to be more DCC friendly. But apparently also I did not know that a lot of these Shinoharas have some weak point rails, and there's issues. And then trying to get this thing operational again after being on hiatus for a bit, just basically it's hard to get all these switches operational and working. And so I pretty much had it with those switches. So I'm going to be replacing them. And I'll probably have some subsequent videos on that process. You see, I have one piece of motive power for this layout. Again, this is one of the engines I've always liked. This is a Scale Train's STL 39, an engine that is unique to the Milwaukee road and generally operated in this area for about 10 years or so. An engine rolling stock is a mixture of while there's prototype and mainline. There's some Athearn cars in here, Tangent, Atlas Master, Rapido, as needed. As I figured that this layout is relatively small, I'm trying as much as possible buy some of the more modern era rolling stock, even though it is more expensive. But again, I'm not trying to put together many different pieces. The layout itself is on a built out of a frame of just 1 by 2s. It was just the idea of the layout also was just get rid of some of the scrap I had laying around. So I had a lot of 1 by 2 furring strips, leftover plywood, and it just mostly things like plaster gauze in places like the embankments where it's lower in the track, and then here where it's a little bit higher. Anywhere I have trees, this is actually just your standard, your pink insulating foam, mainly so that has places where it can grip the trunks properly. So anywhere where I have a tree, I put in where I was thinking I'm going to have trees, I put in foam in there to help support that. And these trees and some of the ones, these and these guys here are a combination of woodland scenics armatures, the plastic bendable armatures that I painted, and then I added super trees. I glued on super trees branches to the whole thing, painted everything, black and brown, and then flocked everything. So it can represent a more finer leaf structure than just using the woodland scenics armatures by themselves, which I really don't really care for. But I needed something with thicker tree trunks. The super trees by themselves are great for like your modern like aspen and birch. But something more of a substantial tree, you need something thicker trunks. A lot of tufts here from woodland scenics and cyflora and hecky brambles and branches and bushes, as appropriate. I mean, I'm just drawing on the same materials I've been using for my in-scale layout. These are all of these are pretty much universal across the board. Since we are modeling the Milwaukee, tracks have been weathered heavily and ballasted, and then with a lot of liberal amount of dirt and weeds in between the rails in places, mainly because it kind of reflects the deferred maintenance of the Milwaukee in this period. And then also kind of added a detail here is that end of from the feed track here. This is to represent was to represent like a runaround or a runaround track that has gotten partially torn out. So it just ends in a pile of ballast under the bridge, and there was meant to be two tracks going under for some distance, but now they've been truncated back just to serve the feed mill and its great elevator. Everything else was for scenery. It was all layered. We did start with brown paint and then earth, then added static grass, ground foam, then bushes and trees, and in that order. We see here some light showing through the culvert. So the culvert here does go all the way through, and has water all the way through the culvert. And it is the subject of a video I had on using how to pour water, and I'll put a reference to that here. The rest of the structures, again, relatively basic. This is a Wather's grain silo, of which I just built it up in two halves. The feed structure is generally one of the Wather's grain sheds, and I literally cut off the back quarter, so it's not quite parallel to the backdrop, and literally we literally cut off the back wall to fit. I find in a lot of cases, if you have a case where it could be a bit more realistic if you have a structure like this with a peaked roof, if you can go up over the roof and then cut it off on the back side of the roof, rather than bring it up to the peak and terminating the peak of the roof at the backdrop. It's a bit more realistic and get more depth if you can kind of bring it and cut it and have the cut end on the back side of the roof. The other major structure here is the overpass. This is just one of those Rick's highway bridge kits, just been modified and with the span links and the piers to fit the embankment. This is where I kind of literally built the embankment first and then built the bridge to fit, instead of doing it the other way around. So this bridge is literally engineered to fit this location. The operation of this, it is pretty much, we have the locomotive starting or by itself or with a cut of cars on the track here by the house. And then moving over and either pulling a cut of cars out of the grain elevator, putting them on the main line there where the boxcar, the caboose is sitting. Then either swapping a car, pulling them out of the grain elevator at the feed, or the team track, and putting them on the lane, and then quote pulling the train as far down the track as I can. I have to kind of move this by myself here because of the broken rail back here, but generally, so it can technically swap about 2 to 3 cars per session. So it has some operation. It's meant to be something where you can work on with 15 minutes or so. It's not meant to be it's not meant to be a lot. I also had added at one time where the popsicle stick is down there. I had built this layout was in a different part of the garage at one time when I first built it, and I did build this little kind of carriage sneak off track that would attach to the end down there, and they'd be put and braced on a shelf on the other end, crossing the aisle where it was sitting. So this would have given me an extra couple feet of tail track. So unfortunately, it's doable now, but it's a bit more limited in space until I can move it to fit somewhere else. Ideas for potential expansion. One of my thoughts of ever going, I'd have to be in a bigger place for this, that I could actually punch through the backdrop underneath the bridge and put like a fill yard in there, staging yard to allow us a bit more running room. And then off the end, I could add additional modules, like going around a corner, maybe an interchange, some more industries. We could actually link this around the walls. Now we will transition to some operations on the layout. Now, if you like this content and want more updates on this HO layout and other things that we do on this channel, please subscribe, and thank you for watching.